Good evening, everybody. Is the volume okay? Yeah? So, thank you, Virginia, and thank you to Evelina for asking me to come this evening. I'm so impressed by how many people are here. And I'm sorry that I'm talking in English. But, yeah. So you all should have one of these, and I will come to this later. I'm going to do this in 3 sections. The first will feel like a geography and a geology and maybe a bit of a history lesson. So just bear with me. I'll go through it very quickly. And the second is really about what I do, and then the third is about how I do that in Folkestone. And I hope it's helpful for what you're about to do, which I think is extremely exciting. So, macro. This is where Folkestone is. And you can see that it's very close to Europe. And I'm very sorry that we're leaving Europe. I'm Irish, so I don't feel so bad. But it's still very depressing. But anyway, moving on from that. You can see how close it is to Europe. It's the closest point in England. And this is the town. There are 45,000 people in Folkestone. And you can see that one of its dominant features is the ferry. And it used to have trains from London that would take people to and from Europe. This is something you might recognize. They are called what are they called? The Dover, oh, I can't remember. Where's, the White Cliffs of Dover, that's it. And you can see it's a very iconic geological structure. It happened many, 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 many years ago. Before, England or Britain used to be joined to Europe. And then when there was a glacial melt, it was separated. So you can see here that the Rhine used to flow into England, which is kind of crazy. And that the Thames used to flow into Europe. I know. And then all of the water kind of caught here, and then when the ice started melting, it just ruptured, and it split. And I like to think that the separation and the sort of energy to try and reconnect is something that is part of the story, despite Europe and the leaving of Europe. I know. And this is the land and the soil and the layers that have been built up over time. And I could talk a very long time about that, but it's probably not that important. And this is the geology that we share with France. So you can see they're the same place. And that's the Straits of Dover. That is the busiest shipping channel in the world. The Channel Tunnel. They tried to do this twice. The second time they were successful. The route goes through these 2 seams here. And it's soft, so it meant they could dig. Now, we call it the Folkestone bypass. Do you understand what that means? So a bypass is when you have a small town, usually the roads go through. So for Folkestone, everybody went through. And then when they built the bypass, everybody went around. So nobody comes to Folkestone anymore. So just to recap, geology. And you can see that it's really quite different. And these are the contours. And anyone who knows their geography or geology knows that the small lines mean it's very steep, and the wide lines mean it's flat. And so you can see it's really steep here. And you can remember the image of the Dover White Cliffs. So you can see on the lines where it's close, there's no buildings, and on the lines where it's flat, or sorry, on the space where it's flat is where all of the town has developed. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly. 200 years ago, and you can see that the town is like this. And it's because you come in and you come out. And these are the hills. And these roads are the same today, really. It's easy to drive in and out, but not across because of the valleys. It hasn't changed much. Back to geology. So these little pictures are just cartoons of how time has changed. And I think understanding, if you're going to work in your neighborhoods, you need to understand how it evolved. And you need to dig deep. That could be geology, it could be history, it could be geography, it could be stories. But it's important to ground yourself in the place. The reason Folkestone is there is because of water, like most places. And if you remember the blue bit on the geology, that's the clay, and it meant the water could come through. And you have two beautiful rivers here. So 1633, 1635, everybody started to settle. Christianity. We started to think about defense. So we started building defense structures. And then slowly the town started to grow. It built its harbour because man started to tame nature. It wasn't so influenced by nature taming it. And then really the big thing that happened in Folkestone was it became a holiday resort. And it was halfway between London and Paris. So the rich, the elite, the kings and queens used to come and play in Folkestone. And it became a very rich place. You can see it started on the east side because of the fishing and the industry. And then slowly but surely it moved to the west. And you can see that this is kind of a bit like your old town. And this is much more grid-like and planned. And the architecture is very different. And then we had the wars, and that changed everything again. And Folkestone has always been a military town. It's not in the town, it's up high and slightly away, but because of the connection to Europe, millions of soldiers left, and most of them didn't come back in the Second World War. So that really holds heavy on the town. And then after the war, between the 60s and the 70s, everybody started to go to Spain on holiday. So the rich had left. We got bank holidays and socialism. People used to come to the seaside, and then that stopped. So it's these kind of patterns of good, high points and low points. And it was really bad. The ferry stopped, economic depression, seaside towns all around England fell into decline. And in the last 15 years, It's a slightly unusual story. We have a local philanthropist, rich person who cares. So he's a businessman and had a multi-million-pound business, a local man. And he sold his business 15 years ago and decided to invest his money in cultural-led regeneration. It's a kind of bit of a fairy tale. But in a way, the capital of culture is like that. You know, it's an opportunity, isn't it? It's something, it's investment, if not just mental investment. This piece of work was commissioned for the triennial by Lewis, and he gives it to artists so that they understand what the town is in an urban sense. So urban is socio-economic, politics, you know, everything together. And it's because artists that are famous don't have time to do deep research. So this is like a shortcut. And if you live somewhere, you really understand what it's like. So this is a series of observations and problematics that are specific to Folkestone. We call these figure grounds. It shows the public space in white and the private space in black. We don't have a lot of green space, which is surprising. The contours, we said, are very steep. When the railway came, there's only 4 places to pass. So it means the town is really, you know, like, it's hard to navigate around. And it feels squashed. This is missing some information. The cycle routes are rubbish. And if you were really trying to cycle around, you would get lost. I don't know what I can do about that, but it's an observation. When the war happened and bomb damage came, weirdly, those sites become car parks in Britain. I don't know if it's the same here. So these are what we call gap sites. They're really the only place for potential development. But in Folkestone, everyone's crazy about car park spaces. So they just remain as car park spaces. The way the town was built in the 50s to the 70s meant that there's lots of cul-de-sacs. No. So roads that don't go anywhere, you know? So you build houses, and it's lovely, but it's a disconnection. So it's okay if you're walking, and if you know the place, because you can find the cut-throughs, but mentally, it has a disconnect. This is the legacy of the ferry port, which hasn't been open for 20 years. So this was done by central government, so that big lorries could get here and get away quickly. But now, everyone has to live with this. Like, it's crazy. It's just insane, but we forget because we live there. But anyone who comes to visit, if you get in a taxi from the train station, you think the taxi driver, you know, is having a laugh with you. Trying to get more money. So the philanthropist I talked about, this was the deprived slum area after 30 years of decline. There are 90 buildings there, and he bought them all and renovated them and gave them to a charity. And they're now for creative business, they're galleries, studio space, and accommodation. Which sounds lovely. And this is the new seafront development plan, new houses. It all sounds lovely. But when you combine all of these, So green space, contours, slowly, cul-de-sacs, one-way system. Where we know the deprivation is, there are 2 wards. There's 3, actually. Here's one, here's another, and here's another. Deprivation, we have 2 of the poorest wards in Europe on multiple levels of deprivation. So childhood pregnancy, unexplained accidents, low income expectation, 3rd generation social benefit dependency. And then in the middle, you put a nice cultural creative quarter. And you wonder why there's tension with new things coming. Would you want to live in the middle of all of that? You were? Did you? When was that? When?
5 years ago.
Okay. It's changed a lot in 5 years. But it took time, you know. Like this cycle of change has been 15 years now, and Virginia was there recently, and Evelina hasn't been there, but it's taken 10 years, and now it's starting to move really quickly. So that's the kind of macro stuff. And then there's the micro stuff, which is literally about the people, the streets, the stories, the everyday life, the familiar, the anecdotes. And I run something called the Folkestone Fringe. I didn't think there'd be so many people here. So I only have this many, so you can fight later. But this is our recent program. And we do it alongside the Folkestone Triennial. And the Folkestone Triennial is massive in its ambition. And it's about public art that is accessible 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This is the 4th one. It's paid for by the rich guy. And Lewis commissions artists, but he gives them a site, a particular place that he thinks has a problematic attached to it. So it's unusual because most places invite artists and, you know, they walk around and they bring the thing that they do. Whereas Lewis, he'll choose the problem and then match the artist to the problem and then leave them to get on with it. So that's what the Triennial does. And then the Fringe, when the Triennial first came, all the local artists hated it because they felt, why are these people coming from outside to make work here? What do they know about the place? But there is something about the outsider perspective and something about how the artist sees the world. And if you can match the problem to the right person, then, you know, really interesting things happen because artists, you know, they think differently. So we started the Fringe and we basically opened it out for other people to, you know, feel part and feel connected. And I think that's probably the most important thing I can say to you, is about enabling people to feel connected to what's happening. And that can be in many, 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 many different ways. Some of the projects that we do, basically the Fringe likes to say yes. We don't have much money, but we have been doing it now for, 2008, 9 years, 10 years. So we know everyone, and we know how to get things for nothing. And people trust us. And the projects we do really are about audience and about artists doing the thing that they want, or other people. And we have 2 platforms. One is a curated platform, which is this. And in a way, it's what I want to say. And then an open platform, which is literally anything anyone wants to do. And the two together make the whole thing feel good, you know? And everybody's got the thing that they're doing for that 3-month period every 3 years, and they start to plan what they're doing for the next one. So these are just 3 projects that we did this year. Pyrotechnics. The council said yes, I couldn't believe it. And this artist here, he came to me and he said, Diane, I heard a story, because Folkestone is a fishing town originally. When they used to make the nets, if they left them in a pile on the floor, because you know in England we have net shops and they're very tall and it's to hang the nets, maybe the same here. If you left them on a pile on the floor, they would self-combust, go on fire. Because of the copper inside, because of what they used to use. I don't know the physics, sorry, but there is a fisherman who's 70 years old now that was able to tell that story to Colin. And he became really inspired, and it took him a year to learn how to knit nets with gunpowder wire. So this is him setting fire. 1 year! And it went up in smoke in 20 seconds. And the site, you can see, it's not a very good picture, but this area is above the harbour, and it's where they used to dry the nets. So, you know, it's connected. And these are random people. This is another project. It's called Stone to Sand. And it's the chalk, you know, of the White Cliffs of Dover. So it's the land that we walk on. And these 2 artists came down and they're like, we want to do carving workshops. And they came down from London. Oh my God, from London. And they wanted to do it with lots of people. And they didn't really want to do an exhibition, or they didn't really want to have an outcome or hold a talk. They just wanted to set up situations for people to carve chalk. And so we said, okay. 300 people later, and it was really easy for us to phone people up and say, do you want to come, you know. They did a whole school. They were exhausted. Like, these are all primary kids. And just open workshops that people could come into off the street. And then they sat there drinking whiskey and threw them back to the sea. And they didn't really want an audience or anything like that. And you know, the pieces were beautiful. Most people actually took them home, and that's what was kind of left. Okay, this is another project. How am I for time? Yeah? Okay. So Anna Braithwaite, who you'll see later, she is a classically trained musician and singer, but does cabaret, and is an artist also. And what she does is she interviews people and writes down exactly what they say, like word for word, and then kind of edits their responses and sings them back. And we started a project in the last Fringe 3 years ago about the harbour because of the development. And she did the past and the present and didn't have time to do the future. So this year we did the future. And she wanted to be more serious in her interview technique, so she worked with a university and, you know, did the research properly. And she just invited people to come and, you know, say what they think. Free tea and biscuits. And this is the visual that she used for the performance. And these placards are some of the things that people said. And when she displayed, she sang the work, but she also displayed a painting that had lots of people's comments on with, you know, the people that said them. And you can hear this piece, actually. It's on SoundCloud, and maybe Evelina, I will give you some links. And, you know, it's not easy listening. You know, it talks about gentrification and how all the people from London should go away. She's someone from London, you know. Okay. So those projects, I would say, are place-based. They related to where we are and what's going on. And, you know, you don't have to do that. Artists can make works in exhibitions and can have their own personal inquiry, and that's just as good, just as valid. But I guess the thing that makes me interested, and probably because of the geography and the history, is, you know, what's going on where we are. And so this project, which is the urban room Folkestone, was about creating a place for people to come to talk about the future. Learning from the past, understanding that in the context of the present, and then collectively thinking about what sort of future we want. And Folkestone is really changing quick. It's 1 hour from London. Property is still cheap. London is crazy. So anyone who owns something in London can sell and buy outright in London, in Folkestone. You know, a house with a garden, 4 bedrooms. And because of the London connection, you can get back to London to work. And the schools are good, it's by the sea. So we're getting families, young families. And usually one person is an artist and the other person works in the city. I mean, I'm being very crude when I say that, but it's the general feel. We're on our 5th wave of in-migrants, and each time it pushes the prices up. And so local people are like, you know, no economic future, 3rd generation benefit dependency. It's been shit for years, and now all of a sudden there's all of these people come in with new ideas. And so how do you make that work together? And also, the seafront is going to have 1,000 new homes that no one can afford. So, you know, it's really complex. And for some reason, I think it's good if we all think about this. So Lewis commissioned this for the triennial. The urban room, it already existed, but he was interested in platforming it, you know, giving it a bit of profile. And in a way, some of the things you might be interested in, the capital, the city of culture might enable you to platform things because it's, you know, it's related to a bigger thing than you. And I think that's important. So this was the space. So I know you're thinking about places and spaces. And you know, you can do things anywhere, really, even for just a couple of hours. But this building, people have been walking past for 20 years, maybe longer, 30, 40 years. It was built in the 1900s, and it was bombed in the Second World War, and then dismantled in the 60s. So actually, for 40 years, people have been walking past it. This is what it looked like. It was the customs house. And I really like that idea of custom. So what your rituals are, how you host people, how you welcome them. And of course, it was where everybody came into England through. So that idea of new ideas and thoughts and whether you were allowed in or not. And all that's left is that little red bit. And it was the baggage room. So I quite like that as well, because everybody has their baggage, you know. And you can see that the train station originally was just straight, and it stopped. But then they built the harbour, and they made it go like that. But you wouldn't know that unless an architect told you. But the room's weird. It goes sort of into a bit of a triangle. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this is what it used to look like. It was significant, you know. And this is what we did. I worked with an organisation of architects, psychologists. They're called the decorators, which is kind of cool. So it's an architect, a landscape architect, an interior designer, and a psychologist. So a really interesting mix. And they like to do spatial design for conversation. So you see the elements outside, you know, you can move them around and you can use them for performance. This was to mark a part of the building, and it's a gateway. And next year I want to have dinners outside in the car park. It's also about claiming public space, because it's a car park. And usually it's full of cars. And we're trying to just create public space in it. And this is it in real. This is a library shelf, and it's about ideas of how you kind of live together, sort of things about citizenship, food, the economy, the future. This is Alan Taylor. He knows everything about Folkestone. So it's important to find the people that know the stuff you want to know. Because if you do it through them and with them, they have the keys to everyone else. And he did the first talk in the space. You know, the very first time it opened as a new place. And I imagine that meant a lot to him. And it meant a lot to me to be able to ask him, because I've lived in Folkestone for 14 years, and I always go to him when I need to know something. You can see the bookshelf is empty. I spent £600 on books. That's a lot of money. Like, as a student, when do you ever have the opportunity to spend that sort of money on books? It wasn't quite, but it still looks empty. And you can see the categories are, you can see also the Geography of Nowhere. That's my book from years ago. And this is what it looks like now. And the programme on the back is what we did. And I left it open, so if anybody wanted to come and do something else, they could. You know, it wasn't fixed, but we had to put something into print. And then food, Apple Day, more food. This was about language and how you express yourself. This was Anna's performance when she told people what the town thinks about all these new people. That's my mum. And actually, that's the mayor. That's the doctor of research that helped with the project. This is Anna. It was a really varied programme. That's Alan.
So this is during triennial?
Yeah.
For a few months?
For a few months. It's late, it was 5 o'clock in the evening. This was a poetry event in a car park. And it was called Something to Declare. And it was about identity and belonging. And people had written poems in the weeks coming up to it. He was a beatboxer. And this was our closing event, which was a dance piece. And featuring Europe. Leaving Europe featured heavily. And so, just to kind of go back to the site, in 2015 I got asked to look after that harbour site and to reopen it as a social space. It looked like this, so it had been in decline for 20 years. And now it's a space that has food, local businesses, and is full of events. And it's allowed people to see their town in a different way. And because of how we operate it, everybody feels welcome. And because is connected to the town's heritage. Everybody has a story to tell about it. And it's a really successful place. It could have just been about the war or about the loss of the railway or the loss of the ferry. But in fact, it's a future-focused place. And it's about people having a good time and spending time together. How are we for time?
I don't know, like 10 minutes.
So I've got a few short films, but I don't know if we can get them up. Or I can send you the links, Evelyn. Maybe one of them just to show. So we also do festivals, and we do that with other people because it's better to work with other people. They usually have more resources. Is it in the... Is it in the... Go into this thing here. And into the folder. Yeah. And maybe that one. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a festival we do called Profound Sound. And Folkestone has a history of being a really important music place.
So Profound Sound to us is about diverging audiences together to meet in a really eclectic space where anything can happen.
Curating different types of music to shift audiences through experiences they probably wouldn't ordinarily go to.
With an incredible audience that is young to old, diverse, and are just really happy to come on this journey with us.
We had Hannah Silver in, and she was working with 60 school children.
So what we've just done is a schools programme. What we wanted them to do was to basically start listening to the world around them.
Going outside and finding things to bash and jump about, and the discussion about recording.
Once they are given the opportunity to put headphones on, you can see them get excited, and then you can see where it leads.
The school children who came to visit were impossibly enamoured of everything that was going on. I've never seen such an enthusiastic group of children. I've just presented a production called Mozart versus Machine, which we build as an electronic essay collage opera.
They're really trying to push the boundaries of what opera is and how you make opera on a limited budget. Profound Sound is about opening up experiences to people in Folkestone that probably wouldn't ordinarily have those experiences. And through that, you inspire people that are here to think differently, perhaps, about how they make music.
I'm going to show you some music on an instrument that I've made called the light interface. But it allows me to play music using light, something that I've been dreaming about since I was about 12 when I saw Jean-Michel Jarre playing his light harp.
We have from Canterbury Montrose Composers Club, a really engaging and bright, effervescent ensemble.
And we had our second year at Profound Sound, and it was bigger and better this time, I think, like the whole festival. We had the audience playing chimes, singing. I think it's quite universal, you don't have to speak the language, music can speak to everybody. I like Sam Bailey's piano piece. He had two pianos which he was breaking down and playing parts of the instrument that you wouldn't normally see played. It's the sort of thing you might think would be too out there for young kids, but I took my kids with me. They understood the theatre of it as well as the music that was being created.
I'm amazed at how people will engage with quite abstract and experimental techniques if there's something like a piano that they can kind of relate to that's a familiar object.
We had Nate Woolley playing really avant-garde jazz trumpet.
An amazing experience, and you know, the people who were there were very, very lucky to see that.
So some of the events really stretched and pushed the audience. Transhuman went down to the harbour and started collecting sound waves that were in the atmosphere and then projecting them back into the quarter house.
It's really unexpected. It excites people. What I hope it does is makes the audience and people that are practitioners in this field just push further.
I think it's really important to bring together people to sort of form a community, and a festival is a fantastic way of sharing, ideas. And I found that my own work is improved because of being in this environment.
We have had an incredible triple bill from Hot Salvation record.
3 bands from the north, Cowtown, who we released. Zam Duo, really meditative, transcendental synthesizer music.
Zam Duo and Virginia Wing did a collaboration that was profoundly for profound sound.
The partnership with Hot Salvation has been extraordinary.
We've walked people through a really beautiful festival and they have been awesome.
And people were there in numbers, really positive, really excited.
And we are very lucky for that. So thank you, Folkestone.
It was completely mind-blowing.
So that's one festival that we do, but we also do other festivals. And this is the last thing I'll say. The other festivals we do are issue-based. They're about where we are. Oh, sugar. Sorry, yeah. So they're issue-based and they're about where we are. And because of the change that's happening, the question is, how do you involve everyone in it? And to really involve people, they need to want to come in the door, And so we do normal Festival of the Brain, which is about the thing that we all have. And it touches on mental health and well-being. And we live in a really poor place, and there are lots of issues. And I'll send the link for that one. And then we do something called SALT, which is about living by the sea and being a coastal community. And we do them with the Quarter House, which is the performing arts venue, and with a third co-curator. So we co-curate it, and then we invite the public in to co-create it. So we have public think-ins, and we literally say, anybody who wants to come and do something or see something, come and tell us. And that's how we make the festival. And they're in their 3rd, 4th year now. And they're growing, but it's people that live there that aren't newly in. It is also those people, but it creates a space for everyone to hang out together and to kind of learn stuff together and to share stuff together. And that's it. I don't know if there's questions, but maybe you're all exhausted. You've been here since 5? 6? Okay, not too bad. So thanks for your time. Thank you.